Hello and welcome to our Insights podcast. I'm Herszon, your host, and sponsored by Value Edge Group. I'm so happy to have with me Mark Engelhardt, also known as the PM Cowboy. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Leon. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And I know that you have your own podcast, so very nice for our viewers and listeners here. PM Cowboy, you can check it out. A great podcast. So, Mark, what is the meaning behind PM Cowboy? Because I know you're in Austria. We don't have cowboys in Austria. So tell us your story. What is the story behind that?
Well, with Brazilian roots, you'll know that cowboys don't just come from the United States. In fact, the original concept of cowboys comes from Mexico, from vaqueros. And if you look at a lot of the people in Texas, which is my home state in the United States, a lot of the original cowboys were of Germanic descent. Okay, because Germans have cows, very nice cows too. So that's part of it. But to get to the question of the PM Cowboy, I'm based in Vienna, Austria for many years, but I'm an American. My home state is Texas. I've actually worked on a ranch. I've lived in Texas for a number of years. I'm a big fan of the Western culture. I actually we have horses. I have boots. I have spurs. I wear cowboy hats, not just as a costume. So I'm kind of enamored with that lifestyle, and that's where the sentiment of it came from. The original idea of taking that nom de plume, that nickname or that name, instead of a bunch of consultants and I were sitting around and we were joking about how clients are often look for lots of titles, fancy titles, the different letters behind your name, but that can sometimes come across a little pompous and maybe not very authentic. And we were joking, and we were giving each other more authentic names based on our personalities. And one of my very good colleagues, she said, "You know what, Mark? If I had to give you a different name other than Senior Project Program Portfolio Manager, I would call you the PM Cowboy." And that kind of stuck with me. You have to be culturally sensitive because not everybody has the same understanding of what a cowboy is. Some people said, that's the guy, who doesn't shave, who doesn't wash, who shoots first and asks questions later. No, that's not my cultural understanding of cowboys. I'm talking about more the traditional, the salt of the earth type of people, hard workers. They know a lot, but their knowledge is always based on, are they hands-on? Can they ride a horse? Can they do the difficult things? Are they willing to do the great thing? And there's a huge amount of humility that cowboys often have. They don't talk unless they have something to say, but they don't shy away from conflict either. They stand for something. And so that's why I kind of like the name. And like I said, it gives me an excuse to wear my cowboy hat a couple more times.
Very nice. Yeah, I should have asked you to have your cowboy hat on you. So how that concept, thank you for explaining that concept of PM Cowboy, what parallel you can do with the role of project manager?
Like I said, it translates into that sense. There's a long tradition, a long historic tradition of project managers. I would say project managers are kind of that. Everybody looks up to project manager. Everybody needs a project manager, but a lot of people are not necessarily familiar with what we do. I often call project managers and project team members the gray workforce. We kind of work in the background and we do our thing. But projects are about making the extraordinary happen. For the day-to-day work, you have plenty of different managers who are trained, who have a position, who have a rank, who have resources, who have a budget for their department. But if you're talking about something out of the ordinary, something that's of huge strategic value or financial value for the company, and it's something that you're afraid of, you need a special person. You need that cowboy with a white cowboy hat who's willing to put on his outfit and go out there and take care of business. So that's how it kind of translates. I would also say I think one of the things that really appealed about it, where project managers can learn a lot from Cowboys, is the work ethic, and I think there's a strong correlation between the two. Real cowboys are really hard workers. They don't necessarily look at the watch, what time it is. They know how to get things done, and they're ingenious when it comes. They're the kind of MacGyvers when they have something difficult that needs to be done, and the tools and the means that they have at their disposal don't work. They find a way to work around it. And there's a huge esprit de corps. There's a huge kind of collaborative spirit between teams that work together in the Western Hemisphere, and that's kind of things that I think lend themselves towards classical project management.
Very nice, thank you. All right, so you've been working, helping organizations on the project management endeavors, training, and everything else. What is your take about project management today, about the profession of project management today? In your perspective, what is working, what is not working?
Well, we've definitely come a long way. If you look at the numbers statistically, there's a lot has happened. There's lots of literature. There's lots of certification. There's a much more profound understanding. There's a much more active and vocal community of practice that stands up. These are people who stand up for their vocation, who said, listen, if you call yourself a project management, there's something behind it, and you need to know what that is. So that's the good side. I think the biggest challenge in project management is a couple things. Number one, everything of value has to be handed off to the next generation. Okay? And the next generation has to hear it. They have to adapt it. They have to sometimes adjust the wording and the process. They have to make it their own. It's a wonderful, wonderful tradition in our society. And this doesn't just apply to project management, but it also applies to project management. I often say that the project management is like a language. A language grows with every generation. There's new vocabulary. And if you look at the new PMBOK, which I see you have back there, that's part of the process. That's part of the PMI culture, is that we understand that for a vocation to stay alive, it needs to be reworked and adapted and adjusted. And we have to allow the newer generations to make it their own, which leads me to one of the challenges. And this is something that Pierre, the CEO from PMI, recently pointed out, and it's something that I've been saying for many, many years as well. We need to remember, I think it's like 1.5, 1.7 million certified project managers according to PMI right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is a great number. I mean, if you remember when we started, those were unheard of numbers.
Yeah, you said, I'm a PMP, you what? Nobody knew what it was.
Yeah, it was like, what is that, right? But I will say this. I think one danger that we face and that we need to be aware of, two things on two different levels. Number one, I always remind people, for every hardcore, well-trained, well-versed project manager out there, I don't know what the actual number is, but I'm just going to take some number. I'm going to pull a number out. There's at least 100 project managers, active project managers out there who've never heard of PMI, IPMA, Prince 2, the PMBOK, any other standard or certification. That's just in the nature of the things. I mean, most of us began as managing projects without knowing that either. And that still applies today. I think we need to understand that as good as our community is doing, our work is not done. Our evangelical work, our missionary work is not done. There's lots of people out there who still can benefit of understanding that project management is a very distinct vocation that requires, where it's helpful to have a framework and a toolkit. Which takes me one step further. I think the biggest challenge in project management today still is, I think if we look at those three tiers, strategic, tactical, and operational, I think on an operational level, I think we've got open ears. On a tactical level, we're making progress as well. I think where we still need help is on the strategic level. One of my passionate topics is portfolio management. I'm in love with portfolio management, but I'm often shocked how little formal portfolio understanding or framework exists in organization. And it's not about, being a goody two shoes. Hey, you need a certification. That's not what I'm talking about. But I mean, the reason I'm in love with it is because that's where the higher order value delivery of projects can come.
Because it's right there on the top of the organization. The strategy defines the projects and programs, right?
And I think where we've been doing this in the last 20, 30 years, but I think we need to rededicate ourselves, all of us need to, and do more, is to reshape our narrative and our talking points towards senior and executive management so that they become more familiar with what we actually do. Mm-hmm. Okay, because right now project management is a little bit like a black box. You see it, but you don't know what's in it, right? And a lot of I know a lot of executives who like stretch out their arms and don't bother me with that operational stuff. Project management goes far beyond the operational value, right? And I still think today that the largest number of reasons for projects to maybe become troubled or not be successful is because they're not successfully integrated on the strategic level. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And that's and for the next 10 to 15 years, where I still try to make as much noise and be an influencer as much as I can, that'll be probably one of the biggest messages or missions, is to kind of break that C-suite barrier and make it part of their second nature. It should be. I mean, I know you do this too. When we meet executives, I love to play little games. I'll say, well, you're a project manager, very cool. And I go, yeah. Can you mind if I ask you some questions? Yeah, sure. I said, how many projects do you have in your company? Oh, I don't know the exact number. I said, well, what's the distribution? How many of them are internal or external? Do you have a framework? Do you have an education program? Do you have a career path for project managers? Have you managed projects before? Do you use KPIs? How do you monitor and control your project? How do you do discovery and evaluation of your project? Do you align? When you do your balanced scorecard, right, or whatever you call it, your strategic baseline? Do you understand that your portfolio management is the strategic integration which will lead you to the word that you said? At the end of the day, it's all about execution, right? I have a book here somewhere on execution. I'll find it in just a moment. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about how much you can talk about it. It's can you execute it?
Exactly.
And we need to have a better integration with the strategic thought, the tactical maneuvering, and the operational. I think that's where there's still lots of opportunity.
And I agree with you 100%, because when I'm having similar conversations, and especially when I'm talking with project managers who usually complain that our leadership does not support or etc., I say, listen, what do you think that top executives care? They don't care if you're using this approach, another approach. They care about results.
They don't care what the name of the tool is.
Exactly.
They don't care what Excel sheet you're using. They don't care. The number one feedback we both get when we consult is, when we appreciate our project, but they're much too in love with the details. Can you summarize it? Can you crystallize what decisions I need to make and how I need to make them? And that's part of it. I think we need to be braver what that's concerned. And it also means that project managers, I think one of the limiting factors, the failed understanding of what the PMBOK principles say is, this characteristic that projects have a beginning and an end. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's my responsibility. That's all I do. No, the most important parts of a project happen often before it.
Exactly.
And especially afterwards.
When you have the results.
If value delivery is the new rah-rah for PMI and the PMBOK, you got to think beyond your life cycle. Yeah. And I think that's where the big opportunity is. I think, the PMBOK has grown substantially. What needs to grow as well as the standard of portfolio and the standard of program management. There needs to be more done in that direction.
Yeah, and I'm very pleased to see that shift from PMI, because when you remember the previous versions, it was from start to end, as you just mentioned. The project management is successful. If you deliver on time, within budget, etc., great. What about the final product? Now they are changing that, not project management success, but project success. Yeah. And the project success is measured by the final product adding value to the organization, right? So that's a nice shift that I also see happening. But I want to go back to, you talk about the strategic, and you mentioned something interesting. For every project manager who is certified or has some experience in more practical approaches and etc., you have 100. That are just try and error, doing the best they can, and etc.
Shooting from the hip.
How do we communicate? How do we share? You talk about being an evangelist, trying to share that. How do we reach those guys? What do you think is the best way, besides things like you and I do? We do those podcasts, we try to share some knowledge. But you have a limited number of people who watch that, and it might be exactly the ones who are already certified, etc. How do we reach those guys who need a better way or increase their chances of success? Because one thing that I usually share with our clients, right, is that it doesn't matter. No single approach can guarantee you 100% success rate. Nobody can. If somebody's promising you that, that's not true, because every project is different, but increases the chances of success when you use those best practices, right? So how do we reach those guys?
I'm going to give you a short answer, and then I'll give you the slightly extended version. One, with simplicity and humor is one, are two factors. Which is important, and with repetition. So those are three factors, and there's probably a whole bunch of other. I was asked, God, it's a long time. It must be at least 20 years. I was asked 20 years ago to come present for a company that has three letters in Waldorf. You can figure out who that was. And they asked me to come to one of their employee manager retreats. And I was one of the speakers, and they said, project management is huge for us. Can you say something about it? And I was like, they probably expect me to come with some kind of technical, framework and all these buzzwords and stuff like that. And I said, no, I'm going to go there and I'm going to have a little bit of fun and be a little bit humorous. And I came to them and I says, the number one quality that makes the career of a project manager is what I call missionary fervor. I said, to be a good project manager, you need to be kind of like a missionary. And then I kind of built up on the joke. I said, what does a missionary have to have? A missionary has to have a deep faith in something greater than themselves.
All right.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And they need to have it in writing. Okay. And that book is often pretty big, and you quote from it, and you repeat yourself, and you give sermons. And you have to repeat those sermons, and then you collect disciples, and those disciples collect disciples. Okay, and you have to have a list of principles, first principles that you work by. You have to have, we guess we could call it a code of ethics. You have to be able to, when the going gets tough, you have to be able to stand up to things. Missionaries have to find a balance between being vocal, okay, and not, excuse my language, pissing anybody off. Okay, you don't want to ruffle too many people's feathers, so you have to find that right tone, right? You have to light the fire from many different ends. And I said, ultimately, you have to be willing to give the ultimate sacrifice for what you believe in, which sometimes means you get nailed to the cross. Okay, which, Leon, I know. I don't know your complete history, but I'm sure you've been nailed to the cross a couple. I don't know a single project manager who hasn't been nailed to the cross for what they believe in. But the good news is I believe in resurrection. So, which I often jokingly say there's there's a couple things. There's three things that I can think of off the top of my head that project managers collect in their lifetime. One is friends, connections, network. Okay, I know you know hundreds, if not thousands of people that you work together with, and you know who to call when you need them. So that's one thing. The second thing is we love to collect concepts and tools. Okay, so that's important. So tools and people are important. And the third thing, and I always say, if I had a dollar for every time I've collected this, I'd be a multimillionaire, and you probably as well. And I often think it, I don't often say it for diplomatic reasons. The ability to say or think, I told you so. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
In your consulting business, because people will, they'll come to you with their context and their situation, and you'll listen to it and it'll sound familiar, and you've been through that 100 times, and you'll make a recommendation and you'll adapt it to the situation. It says, well, I think this would be the best course of action, but because you're not the one who's making the decision, your client or your partner might do whatever they decide to do. And then in hindsight, you're often in the position to say, I told you so. But it's often diplomatic to keep it to yourself. But so those are the things that you collect, and that's part of the missionary mission thing. But I'm going to say this, and I'm a diehard idealist. Of course, we do what we do to make a living, but that's a hygiene factor. I truly found my vocation in all extraordinary endeavors, projects, programs, portfolios, and PMOs. And I think it needs to be possessed by a certain spirit, a certain way of thinking, and I think that's what makes the PM community exceptional.
Thank you. A great analogy, by the way. I like that one. All right. So you mentioned PMO. You just mentioned PMOs. Besides project, program, portfolio management, which we are all involved, PMOs are growing. Mm-hmm. They have different types of PMOs.
36, supposedly.
Yes.
I recently passed the PMO certification, so I know.
Oh, you did? Nice. Very good. So what do you think is the biggest challenge PMOs face today? I have very often contacts with enterprise PMOs and even departmental PMOs or regional PMOs. In your perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges they face today? And how do they
there's a number there's a number of different challenges. I think there's a certain PMO fatigue that's taking place in some companies. Fatigue of, okay, we've had this for a while, but it's not really felt. It's not really understood what they do. I'm going to go back to that concept of the gray workforce. PMOs are often do lots of great things, but they do it hidden and this is a statement I keep repeating a million times. I was at a concert recently where the sound engineer who was working the soundboard had a wonderful T-shirt on, and it said "sound engineer." Okay, and underneath it, the definition was, "You don't know what I do until I stop doing it." And I saw that T-shirt and I said that we need that for project managers, right? So that's kind of the nature of PMOs. I think another huge challenge of PMOs is that there's so many different service options that defining a PMO, having a roadmap, having clear KPIs, communicating what's important, and in particular, being able to succinctly and distinctly show the value you deliver, I think is something that some PMOs are not good at. They become too administrative, which is the death of a PMO. I think nobody likes to talk about this. But it's something that I learned from the military. A good military is always proud of its size and its number of workforce and its number of hardware and stuff like that. That's what you're proud of. And there's strict rules, there's standard operating procedures. But even a large military, which is like an organization, needs for special occasions and is proud to have, those guys who wear the special berets and have the special camouflage and are kind of our superheroes, our Marvel superheroes, right? And those special forces are the equivalent. So project managers are like the special forces in an army. Project managers are the special forces in a large organization, which means they get a lot of special attention. They get a lot of special budget. They get a lot of special appreciation, but they interfere or disrupt a lot of the other branches in the organization, right?
The PMOs.
PMOs do, right? So when we do monitoring and controlling and we track portfolio, we're actually messing with controller domains, right? We mess with business analysts if they're not integrated, right? We kind of have something to do with change management. We're kind of involved with IT since a lot of projects are IT. We're kind of, as a matrix-focused function, we're
human
constantly,
resources, you name it.
We're going across the organization and you know what? We're breaking, I don't want to say breaking, but we're bending a lot of rules that maybe a lot of our other equally leveled managers have to adhere to, right? This is something that I learned from my little bit of military experiences. Senior officers love special forces when they need them, but once that special need is gone, they like to bury them in the desert somewhere.
Get out of here.
because project management allows for a certain level of autonomy and a certain way of working that might not be so desired in the day-to-day, right? So that's an analogy that I would give. And those are some of the challenges that PMOs face. And I would also say it's the generational change. I think, if you want something to maintain its validity, I'm not a big fan of constantly changing the name because that's like the big fashion. If you don't know what to do with your PMO, change the name, right? That's not enough. You gotta, there's more to it. I would prefer you kept the name, but maybe change some of your had a better focus on who are your clients, had a better understanding of value delivery, had a higher level of transparency. So that's the other thing. And I think the other thing, it's a big topic of mine. Another thing that PMOs kind of face as a challenge is they don't necessarily directly generate revenues or profit. Right? They do it by proxy.
They support the process that generates.
So if your company is going through volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and you're unhappy with margins, and there's all sorts of there's supply chain issues, and there's tariffs, and whatever there might be that's disrupting your world right now. You might, as an executive, I can understand it. I've been an executive myself, and as you have, where you say, "Hey, listen, I need to bootstrap. I need to say what is actually delivering value and what is superfluous, right? What is just, who's just sitting around?" And I don't mean that people are intentionally sitting around, but if you don't give them, if your PMO doesn't have a clear vision, mission, objectives, roadmap. I often say, we're talking about Agile. How many PMOs actually have a product backlog or a Kanban where you can see what are they doing? What's the throughput? What are they doing? I go back to an old saying that we say in German all the time: do good things and talk about it. But if you don't talk about it, don't blame others that they don't appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. So we talk about the project management side, the PMOs. Let's go to the organization side, not the project manager, but the companies that we have project managers working there. in many organizations, they still struggle with execution because at the end of the day, as we discuss here, it's not about the approach, it's about the results, it's about the execution, right? So what do you think separates the teams that are more successful on their delivery than those that are not? Why some organizations are more successful supporting those teams that end up delivering more than others?
I think it all boils down. I think the biggest issue when it comes to execution, of course, the skill sets that you need, the technical and other operational skill sets you have to execute are one thing, but I don't think those are the key issue, except if it's like something really new and unique, that the learning process and the training process would be a challenge. A big factor is the onboarding process. The emotional onboarding of the stakeholders is a big issue, right? Because ultimately, I've implemented lots of great products and projects where had we not, put that extra effort forth to onboard people, it would have died in the womb, right? So that's a huge factor. Probably one of the big ones, but what you also alluded to, and I would say, influence, autonomy, courage, and the speed of making decisions, I think, is what defines execution. As a project leader, you have to be courageous. You have to stand for something, okay? And you have to be able to push buttons. But you have to also have the patience and the diplomacy and the communication skill set to speak in the language of the stakeholders you are trying to influence. So when I'm speaking to an executive, they're not interested in technical details. I need to explain to them from a strategic standpoint how this action will have a bigger impact on their bottom line and help manifest the vision and strategy they have. I have to speak in that language. But ultimately, in my opinion, the number one contributing factor why projects are delayed and cost more money is not because we need more materials, but because we have lots of resources sitting around waiting for somebody to make a decision. And the problem is that the people at the top who are paid to make those decisions are willing to make those decisions, but they don't often have the appropriate know-how to know what the right decision is. So that's our role as in PMOs or as project managers to say, listen, I'm going to give you a problem. I'm going to explain the problem to you like you're a 7-year-old, a housewife, a houseman, or a board member. I'm going to do that respectfully. I'm going to make it interesting and to the point, okay? I'm going to tell you what I think the 3 or 4 top options are. I'll give you the pros and cons. I'll tell you which one I would prefer, okay? And why, and then I need to get on your nerves until you make a decision. And I need to make it transparent to you without being a pain in the butt or being a good pain in the butt, right? To say, listen, if you're afraid of making a decision, let's do it piecemeal. Let's go step by step, right? We can always back off if we feel that it's not going in the right direction. But decision making is the key to execution. I don't think the actual work is what's keeping us back in execution. I think it's the willingness to commit and make a decision. That's a huge. And then one last factor that jumps up in my head too is also one of the problems of a matrix organization is this. We're often overusing resources. The resources are there on paper, but they've actually got a full-time job in the line organization, and now they have to work another 40% in my project, whether or not they have the time, or they might have the time, but the question is, do they have the time when I need them? Mm-hmm. So enterprise resource planning is still a huge issue in project management, and being a little bit more realistic. And one last thing, one of my favorite things to say, 99% of the world's population is chronically optimistic. We completely overestimate what we can do in what time.
Oh, yeah. Even when we try to be pessimistic, we are optimistic.
So, that's why, the classical heuristic for evaluating project is if somebody comes to you with a project estimate after initiation and they say, is this realistic? I go, no. He said, you haven't even looked at it. I said, I don't have to. I said, how much is it off? I said, multiply it times 2 or 3. That's probably more. That's just a heuristic. I don't even have to look at the numbers, right? After planning, you probably add 30, 40%. You know, these are kind of experiences that you pick up over time. Mm-hmm. But this needs to be practiced more. And I think what I love about the agile mindset, although it's appreciated but not really understood in its practice 100%, the concept of, you know, you're allowed to try things out and you can change your mind, you can be agile in your decision making, is still something that I think has to grow. In particular, when you consider that a lot of the decision chains, there's so many people that are involved, and you have to go up and to the left and to the right, and you're doing what do you call it? I think in German we call it Stille Post, right? Silent post, right? Or you know, when you whisper one thing in one person's ear and then it keeps going. Broken telephone, I think it's called in English.
Yeah, broken telephone.
I think that's a classical issue. So, and once again, I think if a PMO were to focus on what their job, one of their superior jobs could be, is that translation and acceleration to the different levels.
All right. So world is changing. Of course, you know that I'm going to ask that about AI. So how do you see, based on what you are witnessing now and that you can imagine for the next few years? Nobody can tell 5-10 years, but maybe in a year or so, right? How do you see AI changing the way project managers and PMOs, project, program, portfolio managers and PMOs operate today in the very near future?
I'm a big fan of AI, but I'm also a big critic of it, a constructive critic. I think there's far too much hype. I think there's far too much promise that cannot be delivered in the time frame that we're talking about. That having been said, I'm an active user of AI, and I've used it constructively in many cases. In many ways, I find AI doesn't live up to my expectations, and that's normal as well because it's still a developing process. And partly, it's also my level of understanding of knowing which tool to use. And ultimately, anything of value requires time to learn and to use correctly. But let's get to the more constructive and positive thing. What AI promises. So what we've been doing the last 20 years, there's been a huge focus in the last 20 years on big data. Okay, we've built systems and software that can aggregate data points like never before in history. Okay. The biggest problem always was that data is not information, and crunching data is time-consuming and complex.
Yes.
AI has the potential to crunch data like nothing that we've ever seen before. So one topic that I think all managers have like in the back of their head that keep bouncing up is the topic knowledge management, right? Or operational process assets, if you want to use a PMBOK word. I think it's still in the PMBOK, I have to see, right? There's all sorts, there's a wealth of knowledge that we have. And the question is, are we maximizing its potential? So I'm going to give you an example. If I'm a large organization that has, 3,642 technical IT projects all over the world with various clients, and it's external projects, so project business, right? What is one of the things that slows down my process is the bid process, right? Receiving a request for proposal, going through it, it has to be reviewed by 10 different people. It's always depending on whether they have a code, whether they're available, whether they have the mindset, whether it's something unique or not, right? That's a pragmatic example where I think that in the discovery and selection process of projects, I think AI has huge potential.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's in the initiation phase. In the planning phase, also to aggregate, parametric and analogous data. If I put this into the system, can you give me an estimate of schedule, time, cost? That would be, you can't just rely on that, and you have to double check it, but it would accelerate the process and give you reflect. And you had Max on, Max Longosko is a good friend of mine as well. He's done some amazing stuff, and he's opened my eyes to a great extent what potential AI has. But it's what I like about Max's approach. It's nuts and bolts, right? It's because ultimately, I want to point this out. At the end of the day, this is a secret that nobody talks about. A project leader never has enough time in a project that is medium and larger, okay, to do everything from an administrative and from a leadership perspective that they can do. It's not possible, okay? It's kind of this stretch between I have to have the big picture, the strategy on the other side, and on the other side I have to have all this attention to detail, all these documents. AI could be a huge help here if it was used that way. So to reduce the administration, to reduce legwork, to aggregate knowledge that exists, to help with risk management, it helps with stakeholder management as well. It's a great tool. So I actually think that I don't think it's going to replace project managers, because I think one of the biggest misconceptions is a computer is not going to do the work. Okay, somebody has to do the physical work still. I mean, okay, if you're talking about programming, programming is a place where you can use it. Analysis is a place that you can use it. So I see plenty of great potential for AI. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually also looking at the new PMI standard on AI, and I think that's a great step from PMI to not only look at AI as an AI topic, but also to say, okay, what relevance does it have on how you do your project? And I like this reverse thinking as well. How do you set up a project to implement AI? Right, which is a big issue. And I think the overall project management framework is a good one to review. What is our AI strategy and how we're going to implement it? Because AI are probably more like programs, but there's a lot of project management factors in
there. Mark, one or two books that were influential for you in your career that you would like to recommend to our viewers and listeners here?
Ooh, there's a long list.
One or two. Okay. I know it's hard.
Let me think. Which one would I pick? I'm going to start off with one of the very first ones I ever came across, because it's ancient, but it's still valuable, and it's actually it's a good introduction into management, leadership, and project management. Is 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
Stephen Covey. Very good.
Stephen Covey. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, me too.
His other books are also sensational. What other? There's so many. I'm going to pick a more recent one, and I'm going to pick one that focuses a little bit on the soft skill side, and it kind of alludes to when you say, what are the qualities of a project manager more than tools and process knowledge, which is valuable. You need that, right? And it's a book called Extreme Ownership.
Yep.
Okay. There's lots of different books, and I'm not picking this out because it was written by 2 Navy SEALs. I respect Navy SEAls, but who cares? At the end of the day, but what I liked about this is this, which it kind of ties into the first habit of Stephen Covey, which is have a proactive mindset. Stop whining about what people are not doing for you, or what decisions are not being made, and why things aren't going the way you want to. Do you have extreme ownership? Do you understand that your role as a project manager is to transcend psychological, organizational, process barriers to get the impossible done? And the only way to make the impossible done is to take the word impossible and chop it in the beginning, to understand I'm possible. And impossible is only possible if you understand that your personal ownership, your personal influence, and your proactive stance To see yourself as an active player is key to it. And that means, when the big boys and girls are talking about strategy, I don't stand on the sidelines. I'll listen. And when I think it's important to say something, I'll raise my hand and I'll say what I have to say, So
Very
Extreme
good.
Ownership is one of the many, many books I'd also recommend.
Mark, thank you so much. Final thoughts before I let you go. What would you like to say?
2025 has been an interesting year. I think 2026 is following very much in the same spirit. If I were to say something to companies out there, I know it seems like a brave new world, right? There's lots of things changing. There's lots of uncertainty. A lot of people, they have high anxiety. Hey, I should be doing something in AI. I don't know what I'm doing. It costs a lot of money. I don't see the return of investment. Is AI going to replace my project managers? Is it going to replace my resources? Is it going to replace my training? The answer is no, it's not going to. Okay. Yeah. I felt that a lot of companies in 2025, the first 6 months of 2025 were kind of sitting it out, right? They had a high level of anxiety and they were kind of just sitting it out and hoping we'll see what happens. And then a lot of the companies released a lot of their budgets for operational, for execution, for trainings, for whatever else, development, change. Don't make the same mistake this year, okay? Don't take your budgets and throw them in the furnace and burn them all at once, but extreme ownership. Face up to VUCA is part of our day-to-day work, right? And take it piecemeal, take it step by step, learn your lessons, take your licks, right? Be a little bit more courageous. It'll all turn out for the best.
Mark, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Thanks for having me on.
I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you.